All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2025, number 51. And today, I am calling someone out that deserves it. If you've been watching this for channel for any period of the time, I generally try not to call out people because I don't like to create drama or anything like this. But this particular person deserves to be called out. The channel is Wizards and Wordslingers, and the DM. I'm going to apologize for this right now because I literally just watched the introduction of this video so I could remember the person's name, and my brain doesn't remember proper nouns. So I may be saying the wrong name. If you were watching this, I apologize. But I believe it's DM Jim. It's something akin to that. I'm going to say DM Jim, and if it's the wrong name, please eviscerate me in the comments. But I'm calling out this D&D YouTuber because they made a really, really phenomenally well articulated video talking about an issue that I had with the Critical Role finale, 8.5 hour long finale that didn't need to be 8.5 hours long. Not that it was, but they could have chopped it in half and made it a 2 episode finale. Like, I think it would have worked better. But anyway, he actually is talking about specifically some stuff involving Abria. I mispronounce her name every single time, and again, I don't mean to. The stutter doesn't help, but also I'm just really bad with names. So Abria Iyengar, and something that she did in the finale, and again, I watched the finale. I enjoyed most of it, but there were parts of the finale that just really kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I didn't quite understand why. And I just kind of chalked it up to the idea that I hadn't watched the vast majority of Campaign 3. I watched like the first 3 or 4 episodes. I got kind of disillusioned with it. And watching something for like 4 hours for me, because of all my anxiety issues and stuff like that, it's just not something I can do regularly. Watching the finale was like a marathon for me. It was really, really hard. So I just kind of chalked it up to, it's just that I don't have a connection to these characters that the rest of the audience is going to have because I haven't paid attention to them in years. But in his most recent video on Wizards and Wordslingers, which I will have linked in the comments down below, watch the whole thing because it's again, it's articulated very, very well, and it's explained very, very well, which is not incredibly common on YouTube in general, and specifically D&D YouTube in and of itself. It's technically it's both a good and a bad issue to have. The people that generally give advice on YouTube about D&D or tabletop RPGs in general are extremely experienced and skilled. And because of that, they don't tend to explain things particularly well from an outside perspective. Because they are so used to just understanding how everything works, they will use terms and colloquialisms that make perfect sense for anyone that's within the circle. But anyone outside of the circle of D&D familiarity or TTRPGs in general is going to get lost very, very quickly. This is not a unique situation just to D&D YouTube. It's something that I used to have to explain to my salesmen when I was doing sales training back when I could work. And I worked in retail management. When I would train salesmen, one of the things I would have to teach them to do is to avoid using what I called Christianese. And I actually got that term from when I used to be a very, very dedicated member of the church. I grew up in the church. And one of the things when I was first learning how to evangelize, which if anyone's not familiar with that term, it's basically being able to share your belief structure with people that don't agree with you. And it's actually an essential part of most religions. Like most religions have some version of evangelism built into them somewhere, with a few rare exceptions to things like Judaism doesn't. Trying to think if there's any other like big ones. I think Buddhism is another one that technically doesn't have like an evangelism aspect to it, but the vast majority of religions do. And one of the pieces of advice, probably the best piece of advice I've ever gotten, because I've used it much more than just in the idea of religion. I used it in sales training and everything, is the idea of people that have grown up in the church. We have certain terms and the things like that we just say that don't make sense to people that haven't grown up in the church. Things like witnessing. Witnessing to your average person is, oh, I saw a crime. I am a witness to a crime. In the church, witnessing is sharing your personal experience of how the religion has affected your life, or how Jesus has affected your life. It's like I'm witnessing to my friend means that I am sharing my personal story, or giving testimony basically means the same thing. I'd like to give my testimony. Which for normal people, if you go, hey, can I witness to you? They will go, I'm not a cop. The cops are over there. Go talk to the cops. It doesn't make sense. And so the person that was teaching me about it is like, well, that's, we call Christianese. You know, that's these words, these colloquialisms that mean something to us, but don't mean anything to the people we're talking to. And every single, it's something that experts have to deal with on a regular basis. In sales, I used to have to tell my associates, to go, you have to understand that some of the people that are coming in to buy computers, you know, if you just go, hey, you're looking for, you know, a PC or a Mac, they're not going to know what that means, you know, or, hey, you know, were you thinking about using Word or Word Perfect? Or Word doesn't mean anything to people that are not particularly familiar with, you know, Microsoft programs and the things like that. Word is exactly that. It's a word that means word. And so something that I think that the DM Jim, I hope, the DM, the guy from Wizards and Wordslingers, because Wizards and Wordslingers is on the screen and I can read that, did really well, is he breaks things down in pretty simple to understand terms, and he's very, I keep using the same word because it's the perfect word to describe it. He's very articulate in what he says. He doesn't use a lot of like colloquialisms and the things like that. He uses very simple to understand terms, and he actually lays out a really good explanation that explains why I felt so uncomfortable when Abria was at the table. This is not a hit piece on Abria or anything like that. I've made videos before where I talked about like the drama around Abria and EXU and how I felt personally that I don't think she performed in that role particularly well. So it's no secret here. I'm not the biggest fan of Abria as a DM. I think she's a wonderfully just great person, but her DMing skills, I think she lacks the skill to be able to DM at the level she believes she's at. And again, the way that you develop skill is through practice and training. Talent is something that you're just born with. So if she's not talented enough, there's nothing you can do. Skill is something that you acquire through years of work and effort. And I think she can become a very, very skilled DM and player. But in order to do that, you have to actually believe that you have somewhere to go. And I personally don't think through statements that she's made and the actions that she's taken that she feels that she has any need to improve in certain ways. And so the video talks about how when she showed up, and this is just very, very minor spoilers for the finale of Campaign 3, Abria Iyengar shows up and plays a character. We don't actually have to go into the details. Even like in the video, he goes into a little bit more detail to kind of explain some more specific things. I'm not even going to go that far. So don't worry about being spoiled for it, other than the fact that I have told you that Abria shows up. So he then goes and lays out a pretty easy to follow example of something that I didn't realize why it was that I felt so uncomfortable about it. But when he laid it out, it made perfect sense. Abria was very much playing a disruptive role at the table. Now, this is not like disruptive person, we need to eliminate them, they should never join this game. No. She was just being a little bit of a spotlight hog, which is not something that is uncommon. Again, I have thousands of hours of DMing experience from a combination of running through conventions, running D&D programs for various friendly local game stores, and having a regular Wednesday night game for almost a decade, or multiple technically Wednesday night games going for a decade, and at one point running 2 or 3 different games campaigns simultaneously for years. I have seen this often. I have seen it with people at my tables that I've been playing with for years. I saw it at conventions where I had just random people showing up to my table that I'd never seen before, and I would never see a gig again. This is not something that is unique to quote unquote bad players. No, this is something that can happen to literally anyone. But it is a disruptive behavior, especially if the actions that are taken start taking away some agency from other players. One of the kind of quote-unquote cardinal sins of being a game master is taking away your players' agency. And that can be something as blatant as, I know that's what you want to do, but that's outside of your character, so I'm going to say that you can't do that. As the DM or the GM, it's not your place to tell the players how their characters are supposed to play. That's their choice. But can also be something as simple as you're describing something, you start describing how that particular character feels about that. And I flirt with this line a little bit, because in order to give my players as much information as possible, I will sometimes, in addition to describing, the physical sensations that they feel, I will go into things like, as the more that you speak to this particular person, the more you start feeling this weird sensation in the back of your mind. You're not 100% certain what it means, but something about this feels wrong. You can't really figure out why or how, but the longer you talk to this person, the more it just feels like the conversation that you are having right now is not the real conversation that's going on. And whatever is really going on is significantly more sinister than you currently believe. It's flirting with the line of taking away a little player agency, but the intention is just to give them information in a way that I can't in another way, and I still allow them to make decisions based on that stuff. But what can happen when you have someone that has decided that they want to be a part is they can start taking away the agency from other players, because maybe a player wants their character to have a one-on-one conversation with someone else so they can have a moment with them, and this other player decides to insert themselves into that conversation. Well, now not only are you forcing yourself into a situation that your character is not really supposed to be a part of, but you're preventing another player from having the character growth that they want to have, because part of that character growth requires them having a one-on-one conversation with this player or with this NPC. That's one of the things that DM Jim, I believe, talks about, because Abria does kind of insert herself into a conversation, or Abria inserts her character into a conversation that doesn't really, not only doesn't need her involvement, but was actually pretty easily defined in the game as something that she wasn't invited to and was actively discouraged from participating in. And that didn't really stop her. So, DM Jim talks about the methods that Mercer used in that particular situation. That that basically kind of encouraged Abria to not participate in this particular conversation. And he mentions that they are relatively interesting and creative ways to convey a message without having to do the whole, okay, I'm going to take a pause here. Like, a really simple way to deal with this is just go, okay, we're just going to pause here. Abria, this is a conversation happening between two characters that your character's not involved in. I understand that you're really, really excited about this, but these two characters need to have a conversation without you. It's a really, really simple way to do it, but it is a very accusational form, and in a situation like what's happening on Critical Role, where if Matt was ever to stop the game to make a correction to someone, it would be considered a major, major, major thing. Like, Matt Mercer doesn't tell people off in game, with a few very, very rare exceptions. And when those things have happened, it has been huge. It's like, Matt broke! You broke Matt! Oh, you must have done something horrible, because Matt is the most amazing, wonderful person in the world, and he would never do anything mean or inconsiderate to anyone because he's perfect! By the way, I'm a huge fan of Matt Mercer. I've had conversations with the gentleman. He's been nothing but polite and nice to me. Never in person, but we communicated via Twitter years ago, back when Critical Role was still small enough that Matt could interact with some of the fandom without being swarmed. So the techniques that DM Jim brings up in the video and he used is, one, he had one of the characters involved in the conversation that Abria was not supposed to be party to literally use magic to create a physical barrier that prevented her from coming any closer. And that is something that you can do. If a player is doing something that is starting to cause issues at the table, you can have in-game consequences for their actions. I've talked about this many, many times before with how to deal with quote-unquote problem players. I had one kid, and he was a kid. I think he was like 13 or 14, that was playing at our friendly local game store. And I ran the entire D&D program for this game store as a volunteer. Never got paid or anything, or at least not for running the program. And because of that, in addition to running my own table, I also would ensure that I think we were running 3 or 4 different tables by the time we finally left that store for unrelated reasons. And we literally filled up the entirety of the store. The entire store was packed every time we had Wednesday night D&D. And so we had this kid that was playing a wizard, if I remember correctly, and we were doing some stuff in the 10 Towns in Icewind Dale, because that was the adventure that we were running. And they were trying to get some information, and he decided that the shopkeeper was not giving enough information to him. And so he started just breaking stuff in there and started like using firebolt to cause damage to the shop. This is disruptive player because the rest of the players were doing everything that they could to kind of like persuade this shopkeeper to give them more information, which was how the adventure was designed. Was, yeah, he's not going to voluntarily give you up information, but if you can find a way to convince him, you get all the information that you need. But he simply wasn't willing to wait around for them to make the right rolls and do things. So you just started breaking stuff and threatening him, threatening the shopkeeper, not anyone at the table. And it really upset the rest of the players because as soon as the shopkeeper got threatened, the conversation was over, as it would be in any normal situation. And I basically had the shopkeeper call the guards, and then for the rest of the time that they were in that town, this player was not allowed into any of the shops. He had guards that were going to watch him the entire time. And so it was basically, I gave the player a timeout. And that worked for that situation. He had a few other things that caused some issues. And so I eventually, after session was done, I said, hey, can you stay around for like a couple minutes afterwards? I took him aside and said, hey, I really enjoy having you here. You're a great kid. However, the actions that you are taking with your character are causing some issues. Because of the actions that you're taking, you're effectively playing a lawful or a chaotic evil character. And according to the D&D Adventures League rules, you're not allowed to play a lawful evil character. So you need to make a decision. Either we can kind of change how your character's been interacting with the world, and I'm more than happy to sit down and talk to you about that, or we can find you a new character to play, which I'll help you out with that too. I'll build you a new character and everything, but I can't let you continue playing that character in here because it's causing problems. And again, this isn't me yelling at you or anything. You made some decisions and they just started causing issues. But we really do want to have you here. This is not me asking you to not come back or anything. Want you here. I think you're a great player. It's just these choices are not good choices. And he turned around immediately and actually became one of my DMs later on for that store. So there are effective ways to do it, and in-game consequences that make sense can work. In this particular instance, it didn't, because despite the fact that there was now a physical obstacle stopping Aubrey's character from actually interacting, she kept chiming in and she kept saying the things, and so Mercer used a silence spell. And at that point, again, DM Jim kind of mentions that what Mercer was doing was really kind of peak DMing, because he was able to kind of get the message across. For most people, they would understand as soon as there was, a wall of fire, they would have kind of gotten the hint, oh, I'm not supposed to be a part of this. This is a scene. Aubrey seemed incapable of getting that message. And so doing the same thing on just like escalating it a little bit. Okay, you didn't understand when I put a physical barrier, so now I'm going to make it so we physically can't hear you. That's an escalation. And as much as it did prevent the audible commentary, Aubrey has spent the next minute to a minute and a half miming everything that she wanted to say and continuing to take focus away from the scene that was this is happening. So it didn't actually work. And so that's the point. And I've mentioned this before. The idea of quote unquote problem players is really, really overblown in online D&D discourse. If you ever, go, there's a subreddit that I actually really enjoy going to called r/RPG horror stories, which is just people talking about the bad experiences they've had playing tabletop RPGs. A lot of people think that that's the normal, that's how stuff goes, especially if you're playing in public for some odd reason. And it really isn't. Again, I have thousands of hours of experience. I have run games for hundreds of different people. I was doing the convention circuit for, I want to say 4 or 5 years, and I would do anywhere from about 2 or 3 conventions a year up to, I think at my max I was doing 6. And that was, most of these were 4-day conventions where from 8 o'clock in the morning until around midnight, 1 o'clock at night, I was doing nothing but playing Dungeons and Dragons. Whether I was running games or actually playing in them as a player, it was all I was doing for 4 days. And I was interacting, like I said, with hundreds, if not thousands of people. And then again, for years, I helped run multiple in-store D&D nights where we had people literally walk in off the street. I'd build a character for them while they were standing there, and then I'd set them down at a table. So I have dealt with a lot of people, and the number of quote-unquote problem players I have dealt with is really, really low. Like, I can count it on one hand. With the hundreds of people that I've dealt with, the thousands of hours of DMing, I've really only ever dealt with a handful of problem players. So it's not incredibly common. However, the easiest way to create a problem player is to deal with them in the wrong way. And I think in this particular instance, the silent spell was the wrong solution. Because all it did was encourage Abria to become more defiant and more noticeable. Despite the fact that she wasn't allowed to speak anymore, she became the focus of the game. And again, I remember it happening and just feeling really weird about it and not quite understanding why until this really brilliant video about it happened. And so at that point, I think there should have been just a very, very simple... I don't like to use the word rebuke because it has so much baggage attached to it. But there should have been a verbal acknowledgement of, Abria, this is their scene and your character's not involved. We'll get to your character in a little bit. And I do that every so often. If I do have players that are talking over each other, probably one of the most effective methods I've had to deal with players talking over each other is a very, very simple go, okay, hold that thought. We will get back to that in a second. I want to finish this scene first. So having someone interjecting into the things like that, sometimes, and again, it doesn't have to be a, hey, you're doing something wrong. It can just be, hey, we'll deal with your character in a second. I need to focus on this. And by phrasing it in a way of, hey, in order for me to be able to do this, make it look like it's my problem, not their problem. I can't focus on 7 different characters at the exact same time, so we will deal with your interjections in a second here. I need to focus on this alone, because otherwise I get too confused. That's a really, really great way to disarm a problem player, because as soon as you start calling them out or doing things that kind of indicate your displeasure with them, there's one or two things that can happen. One, they can feel bad about it, which is not something that you want to do anytime you're having, fun with other people. If you make other people feel bad on purpose, it's going to bring down the table. And not just the person that you have to call out, it's going to bring down everybody. So there are ways to correct bad behavior without telling someone that you're doing something bad and you need to feel bad. The other thing that can happen, which is basically what happened with Abria, is they can feel like, well, this is a challenge. And I will stand up to the challenge. You can't stop me, for I am RPGer. I shall role play all the games. And that's effectively what happened with Abria, is every time she was shut down, she became more bold. She was not going to allow the situation to not contain her. And she was not going to allow the situation to happen without her commentary. And again, I don't think Abria is a bad person. I do not think that she's a quote-unquote bad role player. I believe she made bad choices. And I believe that the choices that Matt made to deal with those were ineffective. Again, I don't think Matt is a bad DM. It's just everybody makes choices, and the choices that Abria made were causing issues at the table, and the choices that Matt made to deal with them didn't resolve the issue. They made it worse. So in that particular instance, they were not effective choices. So in situations like that, like I said, a really, really simple way to deal with this without stepping on anybody's toes is to take responsibility for the issue yourself. Go, hey, I can only focus on so many things, and I need to have this, I'm playing a character and I have to listen to what this person is saying. So we will just hold that thought. I'll come back to these ideas and stuff like that. Write them down if you need to. But I need to focus on this first. If you frame it as, hey, this is my problem, not your problem, a lot of people are significantly more likely to respond positively to it. And if that doesn't work, then a very, very simple rebuke can happen. And I've mentioned this before. Absolutely the best thing that you can do if you have to kind of rebuke a player is don't do it in front of everyone else unless there's no other possible way. Find a way to go, you know what? This actually isn't a bad time for a break. Why doesn't everybody just real quick get something to drink or something like that? Can we have a real quick conversation over here and have the conversation away from everyone else? Because you publicly call somebody out, they're going to get defensive. Whether or not you do it really, really well or you do it really poorly, it's going to make them defensive. It's just how it works. And then as the absolute last possible procedure to have before you have to start quote unquote being mean about it, you just go, hey, your character's not involved in this conversation. I get you're really excited about this, and that's something that I always do when I'm correcting player behavior, is you always go, hey, this needs to stop. I understand that you're not doing this to be mean, you're not doing this to be disruptive, you're just really excited, and I love that. I'm so happy that you're very, very excited to be here. That makes my job that much easier. But in this particular instance, the choices that you're making are making my job harder. And my job is hard enough. So I need this to stop long enough for me to finish this. Then we can get back and we can deal with this and it'll be perfectly fine. But just so I can finish this scene, I need to be able to finish this scene. And then again, the final straw that can happen, which again, in my years of playing, I have never had to do this, is, okay, I need you to leave the table for right now. Like I said, I've run at conventions, I have run home games, I have run in game stores, I have run online for strangers. I did 2 charity events where we played D&D for 48 hours in like little groups. And I played with people that I've never met before in my entire life. And I've never had to kick someone out of off the table. It's such a rare occurrence that you have someone that is that incredibly disruptive. And again, a lot of times when I read stories about people having to like kick someone out off their table, a lot of the times you can trace it right back to the initial correction from the dungeon master is just either too strict or is too kind of accusatory and blame throwing. They call them out in front of the other players. They make them feel bad. That's all stuff that's going to kind of guarantee that the person's going to dig in their heels and force you to take extreme action, which is kicking them out of the table. It doesn't need to do that. And again, I don't believe Abria is a bad player. I don't believe that she is a bad DM or she's a bad person or anything like that. I think she does not have the skills to be able to navigate and do the things that she's being asked to do. Playing in a game with 10 people at the table is very, very difficult, not just for the GM, but for the other players as well, because you have to be able to understand when is a good time for you to come in, when is a good time for you to step back and let other people have their scene, how much dead air is dead air versus how much is a pregnant pause. Like it takes a lot of skill to be able to understand how to do that. And I simply don't think that Abria has the experience or skills necessary to be able to navigate that, because she's relatively new at this. And that's not a bad thing. We want new people getting into the hobby. It's the whole point of the D&D Adventures League is it's an infection vector. It is designed to take people who have never played the game, let them sit down at the table, and get their first hit for free. Yes, D&D is pushed like naughty substances, but it's 100% true. That's what the program before the Adventures League was called, D&D Encounters, and it was specifically designed for new players and players that did not have the ability to be in a long-term Giga campaign due to scheduling issues, due to a myriad of things. It was entirely designed to be an infection vector, and it was incredibly effective. The D&D Adventures League was even more effective. We want new people playing. That's a very, very good thing. But with that also comes the responsibility by those of us that do have a significant amount of experience to train the new people and to help them become the amazing players that they will eventually become. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the times it falls to the DM to be that to the training person. Everyone looks to the DM to be the leader of the group and everything like that. And yes, that can happen because I'm a natural leader. Most of the games that I sit down at, people will just naturally assume that anything I say is worth it. And because I'm a DM more often than anything else, the DM is the one that is there to kind of help everybody. But I've also sat down at tables where I wasn't the DM and I was still able to help new players and things like that without stepping on the DM's toes or any other thing like that. So I don't believe that this is entirely on Matt Mercer to kind of help Abria gain the skills that she needs to be able to play in a situation like that. Can Matt be the person that helps her gain those skills? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that Liam can't do it. Like if you watch how Liam in particular is one of my favorite cast members of Critical Role, because he understands how to tell a story with a scene partner really, really well. And when you see him do, especially when he does very, very personal scenes, in campaign 1, a lot of the scenes between like Vax and Keyleth were masterful and brilliant. The scenes between like Vax and Percy, there was a couple really, really good scenes between Vax and Percy. And Taliesin is another person that just really, really understands storytelling and how to work with a scene partner. And so watching Liam and Taliesin interact is really, really brilliant. And Liam in particular, if I remember correctly, he also does, I think he does voice directing as well. So Liam does have the experience of not only just being a good scene partner, but also directing. And part of the role of a director is kind of coaching and getting the correct performance out of your actors. So I think it could be just as appropriate for Liam to be able to help Aubrey out as it is Mercer, as it is Laura or Travis or any other people that are really, really skilled. Robbie is another one that I find absolutely fascinating because despite the fact that he has not been playing with this group of people for a decade, he understands acting and storytelling well enough that he just blends into the group brilliantly. And he, whenever he's interacting with another character, he understands when to take the lead in the scene, when to kind of give the reins back over to his scene partner or scene partners. Like he really, really understands that really, really well. And Abria simply doesn't. And again, this is not me saying that she's a bad person or anything. She is excited. She's passionate. She's willing to commit, which is probably one of the more difficult things as actors we have to learn how to do, is how to commit to a character. Because a lot of times the characters that you're playing are not just like something that's always asked of actors when they're being interviewed is like, well, what part of the character really do you really identify with? That's not the most important thing to to learn when you're being an actor, but it's the thing that you'll be asked constantly. You know, do you identify with this character at all? Blah, 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 blah. The thing that's really hard as an actor is learning how to commit to the parts of your character that you don't identify with, the parts of your character that are different than you. It's very, very difficult. So the fact that Abria has this willingness to commit to her characters, the fact that she's willing to quote unquote commit to the bit, is not something that's easy to learn. So in those aspects, Aubrey is doing exceptionally well, and she's ahead of the curve. However, other things she's not as good at, and she hasn't learned the skills necessary to be able to do it. And this was one really good example of she either was not getting the message or she was completely ignoring it because it conflicted with what she as a player wanted to do. Not she as a character, but she as a player. She wanted to be involved in this. She wanted to be able to influence what was going on stage right now, which is, again, an extremely common thing for actors in general. Again, before I was a dungeon master, I was an actor. And it's really, really common. If you're on stage, you expect people to look at you. And if you're on stage and the audience is focused on something else, it's a really, really common thing for actors to want to get the focus back on them. In the acting world, we call it scene stealing, or stealing the scene. And it can be extremely frustrating for other actors. It can also be extremely frustrating for the director and for the audience, because we want to be invested in this show. We want to be invested in these characters. But if you have another character that's on stage that may not be saying anything, but due to the actions that they're taking, they're pulling the attention away from where the plot is happening, it can be very, very disruptive. So again, this is not like Aubrey is this horrible, disgusting person. They deserve to never... No, Aubrey is making mistakes that are extremely common. Like, it's not like this is something unique to her specifically. This happens all the time, and it's not exclusive to D&D or tabletop RPGs. Anytime you have creativity and multiple creatives working together, you're going to have people that don't quite understand how to be creative together effectively. Again, in addition to being an actor, I was a musician. I used to do jazz was my thing, and I was a part of this jazz combo where we had a rhythm section, and then we had me on tenor sax, a buddy of mine on alto sax, and then another buddy of mine on trombone. And we played together so much, and we worked with each other so much that we didn't have to talk at all to be able to understand when one of us was going to take a solo or when another person was going to back up and stuff. We even had the last concert that we got to play together. It was at our high school's Jazz Fest. And we're playing a song that we have played literally hundreds of times before. We know the song unbelievably well. And so as we're sitting there, we all take turns, messing around and noodling around in the solo section. And then the alto sax player looks at the bone player and just kind of nods to him. And no conversation happened. There was no words discussed. It was just a look and a nod. And he picks up his bone and starts playing with him. And then the alto player turns to me and he just kind of looks and nods. I pick up my tenor and I start playing as well. And we sat there and just improvised this 3-part trio. We'd never done this before. We didn't do it ever again. This was the last time we got to play together as a unit. And it turned out amazing. We just started playing together because we knew each other so well, and we understood the music itself really well. We understood where our particular part fit in there. At the same time, I've been parts of bands where you'd have one group that's just overplaying their part because they don't understand that, well, yes, it's an important part of the song. It's not the focus of the song. We don't need to focus on the third trumpet for the entire song. There are other trumpets in there that have important things to do. So the same thing is true about acting on stage. The same thing is true about any time you're in a group setting where people have to work together. Understanding when to take the lead and when to step back is not something that comes naturally to a lot of people, but it is something that can be learned. And I just don't think Abria has learned that particular set of skills particularly well. I'm not saying that she's incapable of doing it. I'm saying that she doesn't have the skills necessary to be put in a very, very difficult situation, like having 10 people at a table doing very, very intense end of the campaign wrap-ups stuff. Like that in and of itself is intense. It's difficult to do. It is not something that I would have a brand new role player do. I'm not saying that Abra is. In this particular situation, the steps that the GM took just weren't effective in their thing. And again, it didn't ruin the episode. What ruined the episode was it being 8.5 hours long. It was a great end to 3 different campaigns, but dear God, do it as a 2-parter next time. Like I said, I was really, really impressed with DM Jim and how well they were able to articulate significantly better than I did. I've been talking for 46 minutes about the same damn thing that he was able to cover in 9 minutes. So, DM Jim, if you're watching this, you need to make better choices, because there are significantly better things you could be doing with your time than watching me spout off nonsense. But if you are watching this, thank you. I sincerely appreciate it. Would love to collaborate. Love to have conversations with you. Maybe we make videos together. Who knows? But yeah. Like I said, I just thought it was an exceptionally well done video. And again, I've had my own issues with D&D YouTube that you guys are all familiar with, of just how kind of antagonistic and aggressive D&D YouTube has become. And this was just a very refreshing, breath of fresh air of a very, very skilled communicator. So, yeah. Anyway, go watch their stuff. It's really cool. It's called Wizards and Wordslingers. Again, I'm going to have a link to the video itself in there, and I'm also going to have a link to their channel. Check it out. They have a lot of cool stuff on there. Yeah. Otherwise, it's all for me today. I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.